Okay. So this kind of goes into also prior written notice. You have the right to request an evaluation. So if you feel that something is wrong, but the school isn't listening to you or they're kind of placating you, you can request that evaluation. Um, Again, you can call an IEP whenever you feel that you want to. Whatever you feel is best for your child, these are options that are available to you. And with the evaluation, you will know what testing material has been used. And in order for evaluations, like if the school needs to evaluate your child, again, they have to get written consent from you. They can't just say, "Well, we've did this evaluation and we've decided this." No, because again, if that is your situation, you have the right to file a formal complaint with the state, the Public Education Department of New Mexico, if that is what's going on at your school. Unfortunately, I did hear some stories like that at parents reaching out. So I really hope that that's not your personal situation. But if it is, there are advocates that are available to you through parents reaching out. And when you do get that evaluation, you do need to know what the results were. So that is called the MET, and it's the multi evaluation team where everybody sits down and they review the results of those evaluations. Sometimes we combine the MET with the next IEP with this, and it's like a 2 hour long process. Sometimes people will have METs, and then there is a certain time frame of when the IEP has to happen after the MET. I'm not a diagnostician, so it's not my specialty, but I do know that it's one of those things that has to happen pretty quickly. I know that it has to be before 90 days. 90 days sounds really long. 3 months sounds way too long. So I'm sure it's probably sooner than that. So if you've had a MET meeting and no IEP, you probably need to call the schools. Okay, here is something that I'm also really passionate about is behavior. I don't think that you can work with kids with autism and not be behaviorally driven, at least in my field, where you're working with severe and profound. And even with those kiddos that don't necessarily lash out, but behavior is behavior, because I think that when you have kids that are kind of sitting in the corner and they prefer to sit in the corner all day by themselves. They don't really want anything. They don't really want anyone. They're perfectly fine sitting in the corner by themselves. That's just as detrimental to their educational process and their learning as maybe a kid that is running out of the classroom and biting others. Some of those really strong interrupting behaviors. So if you feel that behavior is an issue, or something that is impacting the learning of your child, you have the right to call for or at least open the conversation for looking at a behavioral assessment. Again, some of the parents that I talked to at Parents Reaching Out were saying, "Oh, well, we're just going to give you a call if he's having a bad day." Well, no, you're not. Why? Why is it that the parent has to take the child home if he's having a bad day, if he's not being suspended? I have to admit, I have done that before, but it was really extreme type of situation. In the case of this little guy, he was injuring himself until he bled, where he was picking his body. He was causing that. It wasn't like head banging or running into things like ransacking the wall or things like that. Some of those traditional type of behaviors that we see. No, he was picking himself, and then he was bleeding. And by the time that he caused his third wound, that's when we thought, okay, This is very much a nervous tick. And if he's this nervous today, then is this really the best type of environment? And what we decided to do was he did go home that day, but he came back the next day. And how I tell parents and I tell staff all the time is that we only know what's going to happen today. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So let's focus on today, and it's going to be a good day, because that's literally all that we have. And especially with behaviors, sometimes behaviors are hard. They are flat out hard. And that's the reason why I really advocate heavily for behavioral assessments, and which is under the realm of FBA, functional behavioral assessment. You'll also hear the term BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan, which basically that is when the team does decide together as a whole that the child does have a behavior that is impacting their educational process negatively, and we need to develop a plan to help this child learn better. That's what a BIP is. That's what a behavior intervention plan. And a well-written behavior intervention plan is golden, because everybody on the team gets a copy. It's not saying that your kid is bad. It's not saying that he's unsuccessful. Quite the opposite. If anything, the behavior intervention plan is the key that opens a lot of doorways for your child, because so the school isn't calling you saying, well, he's having a bad day and he just needs to go home. No, because essentially schools need to be following what is on that behavior plan. So you'll also sometimes hear another term called functional assessment. That goes part of the functional behavioral assessment prior to a BIP being written. A functional assessment is just where they kind of set up a situation for a child to be in where they try and get that behavior to come out. Now, there are limitations to that. So, for example, if a child is headbanging, we do not want to purposefully set him up to start headbanging. There is a significant safety concern with that. So, with functional assessment, we have to exercise good common sense, but you have to exercise good common sense with everything in life. So with functional assessment, it's kind of looking at maybe a different behavior, not necessarily headbanging, because I, for one, have done a functional assessment with a guy that was headbanging, and we wanted to look at the precursors to headbanging, because we knew that by the time that he was banging his head, he was gone. All rationality had left this child. So there was probably some other things that were kind of leading up to that. So for example, flipping chairs was one of the things that he was trying to do. Why is he flipping chairs? So we kind of thought, okay, the chances of him flipping a chair and hurting himself is a lot less than him headbanging. And it really was. It wasn't like he was picking the chair up and throwing it across the room. No, if he was doing that, again, common sense exercise, we're not going to do that. It was just like he would walk by a chair and just tip it over. So kind of more so annoying things. So that was what a functional assessment was, and that later led on to a behavior intervention plan. So again, you have the right to educational confidentiality, means the school can't be just talking about you and your child to just anybody. They need your consent. Free and appropriate education, that is the reason of why we do the testing, why we have special education in place, because it can be really difficult when a child is in a setting that is inappropriate. And I mean that both ways, whether it is a child that needs more of a self-enclosed classroom, or if it's a child that is in a self-enclosed classroom and hey, we kind of need